So after some final review, I probably would have given myself a B plus on the paint job right after I sprayed it, but unfortunately, I think I'm gonna have to demote that to a D minus because after looking it over and doing a little bit more research and talking to the company, I know I should have realized this beforehand, but I apparently didn't. But the name of the color is called Trumpet Gold Poly, and I've been around auto body for 10-15 years at this point, and I have never heard of a metallic color being referred to as poly, but apparently that's short for polychromatic, aka metallic, and then that ends up making a lot more sense given how the paint looked before I sprayed it. So after all of that, I am a little bit further disappointed in how the paint job came out, and after looking at it in various lights, and given that it's a metallic, a lot of this starts to make more sense, and I started to notice more orange peel in this area than I really would have liked. And the tiger stripes that I mentioned before is actually modeling from spraying it too heavy, which I wasn't concerned about because I didn't think this was a metallic, but it's certainly an issue when you spray it too heavy on a metallic color. So that's the metallic flakes not being dispersed properly. And had I known that, I would have used a drop coat to even out the metallic flake. But after looking at it more and more, I just feel like I did a garbage job, and more than likely I'm going to end up repainting this. And then one thing I think I neglected to mention earlier was that I ended up having a couple of runs right here and right up here. Yeah, there you go. So I was under the impression, because I didn't think it was a metallic single stage, that I could have cut and buffed them. But also, again, after learning that, after I started to cut and buff and started on the trunk, after I cut and buffed it, it lightened up, and that makes a lot of sense. Given after you cut and buff a metallic, it adjusts how the reflection of the metallic particles, or adjusts how they're laid out. So after I cut and buffed this, it looked like glass, but it was like 3 shades lighter, and you could certainly tell the difference between these two. And then that came to, oh, well, you can just cut and buff the whole car, but then I don't know how, I don't want to run the risk of having to do things like this, and then maybe cutting through the paint, because I only sprayed 2 coats, or cutting through things like this. And after all of that, I'm like, oh, well, I don't know, maybe it looks good enough. Maybe I can just respray this and live with a crappy paint job. But then also, further, one of the other places that I apparently missed spraying was the inside of this area. And it kind of looks somewhat similar now, but I resprayed that, and I had used my entire gallon, like 100% of my first gallon, and I have a second gallon, but as you can tell from the edge of this corner, this second gallon seems to be slightly lighter. So then I won't be able to match this panel if I respray that. So I think I'm just gonna kind of have to give up on this first garbage paint job and wet sand it all back down and start again. And remember that it's a metallic this time, so that I remember to do a drop coat and get rid of the tiger stripes on the hood and on the roof and on the doors and on a little bit of modeling on the sides of the fenders. So it's a little bit disappointing, but I guess that's the way it goes. So I'm pretty much just trying to race the weather so that I can hopefully get this done before it gets too cold, before winter hits. So we'll see how it goes, but I think the only bright side of all this is that I can mask it slightly more easily, given that the inside of this is already painted, and you won't be able to tell the slight shade difference because of the trim in here. So I'll be able to at least tape this window and then be able to just tape this area normally and respray that so that it won't it will become a science project to try and respray that interior rail, which is a huge pain. So kind of disappointing, but we will hopefully get this resprayed and get the color consistent so that I can restart putting it all back together. I'm still half and half on if I want to spray on a clear coat after this, because the areas that did turn out nice ended up that laid quite flat just by happenstance. It would seem that I did a good job on, like the quarters are actually quite clear, and they look pretty good. But if there's any mistakes in the spray process, like on these pillars, then you're just kind of SOL. So I don't know that I want to run the risk of screwing up the paint job even more by trying to add on a clear on top of it. But now I know several things to look out for, at least with the sweat and a drop coat, so that I spread out and don't get tiger stripes. And also, one other thing I specifically noticed is when I did the underside of the trunk lid, it laid out very nicely. I taken everything that I had learned, and there are no tiger stripes. Everything looks very, very nice. But one of the things that I had to do in order to achieve that had kind of concerned me, that resulted in a relatively thin paint job, was that when I would do my test sprays, I had to thin it out quite a bit. I had to reduce the fluid a lot. And then I got this nice fine mist pattern, and that's what resulted in a really nice job. But then when it came time to do the car, I was more concerned about protecting it against UV, so I didn't want to mess it up and have it be too thin and have it start to rot out the car or eat the paint. So I sprayed it on heavier, and I didn't reduce it enough because I was a bit afraid of spraying with too much reducer, because I didn't want it to run, and that kind of came back to bite me. So you can see some of my test spray patterns. If you look at the edges, these are starting to, you can see the edges are starting to glob up quite a bit, and I probably should have used a finer mist, which definitely would have helped cut back down on some of that. Ironically, cutting it with more reducer or spraying it with less fluid probably would have helped in both cases by reducing the amount of paint going on, which would have reduced the modeling, as well as helping in cases like this, where I probably was spraying too close, and it didn't atomize enough, so I ended up getting that orange peel. So we'll see how the next paint job goes. Hopefully it's not nearly as garbage, but at least the next time around it'll be a little bit easier to, since all the body work's already done, I really just have to cut this down with probably 600 to respray another coat. So hopefully that should be a little bit easier in terms of prep. So wish me luck.